Hello, I'm John Cogan, the CEO of Performative, the leading platform for professional development across the Office of the CFO. I would like to welcome everyone to today's event entitled CFO to CFO, Perfecting Key Business Processes in the Cloud. I would like to thank our sponsor, NetSuite, whose support and commitment to thought leadership in this realm helps us make this educational webinar possible and delivered at no cost to the participants. To get to the next level, fast-growing businesses have to take advantages of technology to improve cost efficiencies, compensate for limited resources, and chart their strategic direction. In today's webinar, our speaker, Tom Kelly, will discuss key processes that lead to successful cloud adoption, resulting in higher performance across many key areas of finance and accounting. We have a few learning objectives for today's event. After attending, we certainly hope you will be able to recognize how to apply practical application of cloud technologies to solve everyday business challenges, recognize how to reduce non-value-added complexity to focus on what matters most, and finally, list real-world examples of how companies have improved operations and performance using cloud technology. Now, we have a few notes on today's event, so let's go through those real quickly. The PowerPoint that you'll be seeing today is already available under the Handouts section of the GoToWebinar control panel. You might have to hit the little blue flower-looking thing in your applications area on your desktop in order to pop that application to the front. But once you do, you'll see a section there called Handouts, and once again, you might have to hit the plus in order to expand that, and then you can simply download the PDF of the slides. We will also be sending you an email within the next 24 hours that will have links to both the presentation to download and to the recording of this presentation, which we are making right now. We are offering CPE for today's event. That's Continuing Professional Education Credit. For those CPAs in the audience, please stay on for the duration of our event and answer all 3 polling questions in order to get your CPE. And the credit will show up in your My CPE area of your Performative profile within 24 hours. If you have any questions at all, simply email us, cpe@performative.com. We would like this to be an interactive event. We've got a wonderful speaker, longtime CFO, who I will be introducing shortly. It's a great opportunity for questions, so please ask questions at any point in the event, simply using the questions input area of, once again, your GoToWebinar control panel. Ask questions at any time. We'll queue those up. We'll get to them at the end and have a great interactive conversation with Tom once we get to that part of today's event. Finally, at the very tail end of the event, literally as we're shutting down the webinar, we will present you with a short survey. We greatly appreciate your feedback. It helps us do better every time out. We really look at that feedback and take it very seriously. So anything you can tell us that'll help us out, what you liked, what you didn't like, what we could be doing that we're not doing, etc., please let us know. And that would be very helpful. So thanks so much in advance for that. All right, welcome to Performative. We've got first-timers on today. We also have returning members. Thanks to one and all for joining us. Performative is the leading professional development resource for every member of the Office of the CFO. We have a number of legs to this stool. The first and sort of oldest on our platform is the peer-to-peer community, which is a wonderful place to learn from your peers. We have over 10,000 threaded conversations going on, everything from technical finance and accounting to leadership and other professional discussions. So it's a wonderful noise-free place to hear from your fellow finance and related professionals. Number 2, we do about 200 webinars like this every year, which we love to do virtually every Tuesday through Friday. Thanks so much for joining us for this one, but check back often and you can see what's coming up. We usually have those listed on upcoming webinars on our site up to about a month in advance. Also, I'd like to introduce CFO Dimensions Conference, which we have coming up in October 19th and 20th at the Conrad Hotel in New York City. It's a wonderful place for networking, for learning, and it's going to be a great show, so we highly encourage you to check that out. Also, I'd like to mention Performative Academy, which is our collection of almost 250 now on-demand courses. Those are kind of like webinars, but available anytime, anywhere. So if you'd like to know more about any of this, and specifically Performative Academy or CFO Dimensions, just let us know on your survey. All right, time to get to the good stuff. The reason we're all here is to hear from the gentleman I'm about to introduce, Tom Kelly. Tom is a partner at Cumula 3 Group. Tom started his career steeped in finance, climbing the ranks to CFO, but during his career journey, he also became, interestingly, a CIO. Today, Tom serves as partner for Cumula 3 Group LLC, a unique company that was founded to facilitate moving company processes entirely to the cloud. Tom considers the linkage of strategy to key business drivers and processes to be the best predictor of company success. And Tom would be in a great position to know, given his background and experience. Tom, it's great to have someone who's so closely wed both finance and technology in the enterprise world, and we really look forward to your insights today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great, thank you, John, and thanks for everybody out there who's taken time out of their busy schedule to listen in here on the Performative conference. So let's get right into it. And so in my experience, whether I was beginning out as an auditor back in the day, or a financial planner, and then to CFO, it's amazing to me about how complex we can make processes, or how we like to take things that should be quite simple and straightforward, and yet nonetheless, instead of going from point A to point B, we tend to take the circuitous route from A to F to Z. So just to give you a little idea here, so we have complexity, and things can be pretty complex, right? So we're looking at this, it's kind of a graphic. Not quite sure what to make of this. What does this really mean? How does this all come together? And pictures are worth 1,000 words, right? So, very simple, right? Tic-tac-toe, I see. So the idea, and what I'm going to be talking about here today is, at a high level, talk about some processes and how we like to look at them from a complex standpoint, but then if you boil them down and start to look at perhaps certain ways to do them, and then in the perfect world, you need to have something that's going to carry out that wonderful idea, process, or whatever, that doesn't require millions and millions of dollars and tens and twenties of resources, hence the cloud, and how these two things are coming together in a big way over the past, I'd say, 10 years. So the first thing I want to talk about is how companies view themselves as being unique. Meaning, we're unique. There's really nothing out there that fits our business. We need customized solutions. We can't take things off the shelf and tweak them somewhat. So we have very, very detailed requirements, and we're different than anybody else. So I'm going to talk about two clients that I've had the pleasure of working with. And if you look at this graphic here, one of the companies that I work with is called FeedLogic Corporation. And FeedLogic is a wonderful organization where you get to be one with the pigs of the world here. And for those of you who don't know me, I've done a nice thing here pointing out that that is me in the white suit and the pigs are in the pink. So there should be no confusion there as to who's who. But what this organization does is they use cloud technology to feed pigs. And while we may think feeding pigs is simple, it's actually pretty interesting. It's quite complicated, and it's almost a science. But what's been interesting about it is how manual that science can be actually at the pig barn. So that's a very unique and distinct company, right? Very different than others, I think you would agree and wouldn't argue. For those of you who are not in agriculture, a very interesting dynamic in how to do this, where they're feeding pigs based on certain types of nutrients and medications and you name it, to make sure that these pigs are getting the maximum nutrition that they need and that they're ready for my vegan friends out there, I don't want to get too graphic, but let's just say when the piggies go to market. We'll leave it at that. It's a very unique company. Let's talk about another client. And this is a pretty unique company. They come out of the Mayo Clinic, and they use technology. And what they do is they are a company that uses calibration over the internet, over the cloud, to calibrate MRI machines to make sure that the images are clear, that the configurations are set such that there's no confusion in the images. And the way you would probably understand this from an analogy standpoint, and this is an old one, remember the day when we had the copier machines and the Xerox or Kodak or whoever brand you were using, the repairman would come in and your copier could be down for half the day. Well, what's interesting with these MRI machines is they can be down for a full day as well. And when you look at the business and how doctors and physicians need to make sure they're being as efficient as possible, when an MRI machine is down, that's a big hit to ROI. So they came out with a way to configure the system over the internet to make sure that it is compliant and that the images are correct and everything else. Now, here's a company that comes out of the Mayo Clinic, very different than a company that feeds pigs. What I will tell you is both of these organizations use cloud-based ERP system that is the same. The way they pay the bill is pretty similar, the way they pay employees, the way they collect cash. What I would consider the 80-20 aspects of what a business does, that 20% that might make these two businesses unique, there are things you can do within certain applications or other cloud offerings that mesh well with cloud ERP offerings that can result in allowing you to have very efficient processes, minimal resources, so we don't have to hire a whole team of folks to get stuff done and not just get it done, but then maintain the application going forward. And it allows you to make sure that you're doing the right thing for whoever your customer may be or your clientele, whether it's a pig or a human being. So the point I'm trying to make here for all of you is to take a step back, and if you're so convinced that your business is so different than anybody else and you need some customized solution, I'd argue if you take an 80-20 approach, you'd be surprised at what's available to you out there that you can leverage day one, just lighting up the application and putting in your parameters. And so Mr. Einstein here, this is a good quote from him. He said, if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. And it's pretty interesting because when we think about what we do as a business and maybe the process or function that we're in charge of, the idea here is you should be able to explain it to a 6-year-old. And that's not to mean we're not important or what we do isn't complex or it requires some higher level of intelligence, but in able to explain how things are working and how you go from one point to the next and what the inputs and outputs are, it should be pretty straightforward and pretty clear. And the next thing I'll tell you, though, is many times what we end up doing is we try to recreate the wheel. And that's, in my estimation, a lot of wasted time and could potentially be a lot of wasted effort. So one of the things that I think is important to show is that many of these cloud-based organizations, whether they're providing an ERP or a microcosm of a certain process, say travel and expense management or budgeting and planning, and I'll get into some of these examples as we go forward, many of these companies have baked into them in these cloud applications very well thought through processes. And so if you look at from a north to south perspective here on the left-hand side of this chart, the function of commerce, marketing, sales, there are certain things that, as I mentioned with these two companies I just told you about, that how they do marketing, even or not, the fundamentals of what they're doing is the same. Obviously the market segment and might be a little bit different, but nonetheless the 101s of marketing, how you put together a marketing plan, a budget, and how you execute it, and how you get perspectives on whether it's segmentation, how your campaigns are performing. There's set ways to do that. And what's nice about some of the cloud applications out there is they're not just one flavor. You may have 5, 6, 7 different ways to configure that process for a campaign, but at the end of the day, it's not like you have to think about the best campaign process ever and create it from scratch. I would argue if you take advantage of some of these offerings out there and maybe take a step back and look at your own process, you may find that you can do some changes that would make life a lot easier, not only for the individuals in the organization, but actually it will be more impactful to those market segments that you're trying to address. Other things to consider as we go down here, sales, right? In a lot of my experience, I love salespeople. I'll leave it at that. But when we talk about things like there's the Cadillac version of the CRM offering out there, and there's kind of the basic versions of CRM offerings out there. When you get right down to it, I think what makes an effective sales force is, number one, how many people are you calling, how many quotes are you sending out, and how many quotes are you winning, what's your hit ratio. Pretty basic stuff. It's not to say you don't want to add more to that, perhaps, as you crawl, walk, and run. And you'll hear me say that perhaps a few times here. But the point, again, is trying to keep to the 80-20 approach of what's going to make a business good, taking the complex and making it more simplistic, if you will, and being able to deliver on not only here's the process, but you're going to get meaningful information that people can action on. And opposed to, myriads and heaps of data that is very, very difficult to migrate and sort through to decide upon what's the right decision to make. And then there's other things too, as you get into ordering, sourcing, warehousing, et cetera. Again, I definitely encourage folks if they're to go to a cloud solution and they're looking for certain things, whether it's to solve a very specific pain point. I use the travel and expense management analogy because I think all of us have experienced it, but there's other things out there. So you maybe not have to go to a full-blown ERP solution. There may be other applications out there that'll solve very excruciating pain points that the business is suffering from. Spending too much resources on maybe what you would consider not to be value additive, driving your business forward. So now we will go to our polling question.
Yep, thank you very much. So this is the first of 3 polling questions I'm going to launch right now. And as we'll do throughout the program, I will leave this open for 30 seconds so that everyone can have plenty of time to answer. This is a quick and easy one. Do you feel your business requires a custom solution for 80% of what you do? Yes, no, I don't know. And that is a really interesting point that Tom makes there. A lot of folks think something is core, and then they, look into a neighborhood or a neighbor business, and they determine, no, we're actually doing it similarly, or we could be doing it similarly, and let's not spend all of our time and dollars customizing something that's just not core to our business. So let's go ahead and close this down and take a look at where folks came out. So I'll share out the results. And you should be seeing that right now. So the question, do you feel your business requires a custom solution for 80% of what you do? And a whopping 30% say yes. Tom, what do you think about that? That's actually surprisingly high for me here.
Yeah, I think it's high. I was expecting that to be more like 20%. My big belief in the Pareto rule, right? So 80-20. What's interesting to me is the 17% that say I don't know. Will be interesting to understand why you don't know, because that's where usually when I see an answer like that, it means perhaps the processes are not as simple and straightforward as they should be, hence Mr. Einstein's comment about being able to explain it to a 6-year-old so they can understand it. So it's interesting, that response, in terms of what needs custom and what doesn't. The other quick thing I'd break down on that is when we do say custom solution, what I also find out sometimes with clients is they need a custom solution, but it may be for something very specific, like trying to pick something different. Hey, let's say budgeting and planning. And you may think it needs to be custom, but what you'll find out there, many of you may know this, is there's vendors out there that provide, I don't know if I want to call it custom, but it focuses on a niche like budgeting and planning. And what you can end up doing is adopt some type of an ERP system. But if you have a real need to go very deep on the budgeting and planning side, there are offerings out there that you can use that will mesh well with that cloud offering, that ERP cloud offering that will pretty much be integrated with the solution, and it allows you to go much deeper, if you will, in a certain area. So interesting responses. So let's talk about the expectations for planning and how they are ever increasing. Not quite sure if anybody's heard of what's happened in the market yesterday and today. If you haven't, don't look. Just continue to go about your day. But it was interesting how the market dropped, almost 500 points or whatever on Friday, and again on Monday. And sorry, but John, maybe I don't know where the market's at today. I looked at first; it was up 300. So sometimes there's fear. And there's reactions to stuff where you really don't get the information that you need. But again, I don't want to be hypocritical. We don't want to get so much information that we're inundated and we become paralyzed and not know what to do. So one of the things I'll talk about here is the whole expectation around, planning and budgeting and how these expectations are increasing. So there's obviously the component of a public company, but even to the private company. We're a small company and we are very detailed about how we want to do our plan because one would argue, well, only big companies need this. Well, I'd argue small companies need it too, because you almost have to be more laser guided in terms of when you're going to hire that new head or when you're going to reach out for more capital. So to be able to have the ability to do this in a detailed fashion is great. But again, if it's going to be a standalone situation where you're not going to be able to mesh it into your day-to-day operation, Sometimes it ends up being a wonderful model that sits on the side that only a few people are aware of and they know how to use. So in talking a little bit about this, when you look at the stages that we can go through, there's this transaction management component. And think about that. That's, an accounts payable invoice. It's a, accounts receivable payment. And really, when you start to look at the transaction piece, one would argue that the accountants are going to own that. And, what you're really looking at is the number of transactions. That can be a real challenge. Well, if you try to do that manually, you try to do it in Excel, it's very difficult, in my estimation, to take that information and do something with it, to really infer from a host of data. And I'm not even talking about year over year. I'm just talking about maybe it's the last 6 months. You can get some inferences in terms of what's going on with your business, particularly in this day and age where things are dramatically changing at a moment's notice. So to be able to take those transactions and the sheer volume of them, but then to be able to boil it down quickly and make sense of it is pretty profound and pretty impactful for your organization. Next is looking at controlling the business. And so when you think about your process managers, you really want to be consistent. You want to have what I would call process excellence, hence the making processes less complex. But really what you're looking at here is you're looking at your variance reporting, you're looking at your tax information, audit, treasury type stuff. And it helps you control the business in a way where you can perhaps reduce your risk, you can minimize exposure, and you can get improved reporting in terms of what's happening on a detailed level and a holistic level. Next is when we get to our favorite piece, and that is the planning and analysis. And this is where you get into your business partner components, if you will. So not just the CFO, but how the CFO and his or her staff interacts with the rest of the organization, so that we're not just the accountant who basically gives you historical information that's not necessarily actionable, but you can do things like rolling forecast, factor in their performance management, looking at KPIs, and the ability to do analysis. So as our business changes, we may have needs. If you think of an income statement as a portfolio, we may snap the chalk line at the top saying we want to do $50 million in revenue and we want to have $5 million of EBITDA. But if any of you can literally nail every single item on that income statement and it comes out plus or minus 1%, please send me your email. I would love to come to work for you because that's pretty profound. But the reality is things change. We may need to add headcount because sales are rising, reduce headcount because sales are decreasing. We may need to do something differently because, hey, gas prices are now going down, oil's going down. Maybe it gives us the ability to actually expand the business in a much more efficient and cost-effective way. Without having the ability to look at stuff over time and be able to crunch a lot of data quickly, I would argue that many companies don't have the ability to turn on the dime, if you will. And then finally, to integrate all of this, the functional excellence that we're talking about here, to be able to do things where you can holistically look across the enterprise for anything from business development, as I mentioned, to expand your business, reducing risk across the enterprise, whatever it may be. There are many, many things that are going to be important to an organization, both large and small. So 1,000 employees to 10 employees. I'd argue it's a good discipline to be able to do, but being able to leverage some of these applications that are out there to help you do that can actually make you, be just like a 1,000-employee company, if you will. So another way to look at this, it's not empty rhetoric. I can't tell you the ability to connect your ERP system to a budgeting and planning program is very helpful in many ways. And number one, it could encompass the entire organization. Again, one employee to maybe 100. The ability to, when you're looking at analysis and you're looking at a variance, to drill down just by clicking a mouse and really intuitively understand what's happening is amazing and really gives people, for lack of a better analogy, the information at their fingertips, 24/7, 365, wherever they are in the world that has a high-speed internet connection or mobile capabilities. So being able to see that information and make the right types of decisions upon it is ultimately what a company should strive for, and I'd argue there's plenty of cloud applications out there that can help you get there very, very quickly if you, again, adopt components of their processes and not try to recreate the wheel. And then to be able to look at some things and maybe, God forbid, I know I've never done this, accounting made a wrong entry. Maybe perhaps some of you have had that problem, but never myself, as John well knows. I'm kidding, folks, but to be able to quickly see something and rectify that before perhaps all the reports go out is a wonderful thing to have, so people aren't making wrong decisions on information. So that was budgeting and planning, and now perhaps a little tongue-in-cheek here, but there is a lot you can do with ERP cloud applications. Some of them have very great dashboard capabilities, reporting capabilities. And this is an example of something where we had a company, and this person she was the accounts payable person in charge of accounts payable, and they joked around, she was the czar of March Madness, meaning she would do the office pool, if you will, and she used to do it with Excel, and it was a whole manual process. Well, one of the things she did is there's a wonderful application out there called PickHoops, which if you look down here below, it is a very easy way to administer an office pool, believe it or not. But the problem was, as you can imagine, the organization was going on to, I guess it was CBS Sports, to watch the video or see what the scores were. So they're toggling back and forth, you name it. So what we ended up doing is we literally put in the dashboard for folks what were the current standings, and where we also had the scoreboard for CBS Sports. You don't see it on here. So the mindset was folks aren't going to be wasting time. They're not going to be clicking back and forth. They're not going to get caught up on other stuff. Everything's going to be right there on the dashboard. Not only for the czar of March, but we also joked around we the CEO of accounts payable. And not to joke about that, but what you can end up doing is many of these cloud-based applications are what the term is role-based. So what is your role? If you're in charge of accounts payable or you're in charge of sales, effectively you need to think of yourself as the CEO of that particular process. So the CEO of accounts payable, hence the czar of March Madness, had a wonderful dashboard that kept her focused on the accounts payable items that she needed to care about day in, day out. But it also allowed her to effectively communicate to the organization on a real-time basis where they stood from the office pool standpoint, and also had them not toggling back and forth to other applications. But there's at the bottom there, I say, take that Challenger Gray and Christmas. Was a study out there by this firm that basically said that I think the productivity of the American workforce during the March Madness basketball tournament decreases significantly. Well, I would argue they didn't ever survey and look at this company, but I would argue they're the most efficient organization during March Madness, if you will. So I use this a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but also to show you there's a lot you can do here. So if there's other things that are going on, if you need to have information feeds from certain alert things, business wire, whatever, you'd be amazed at what you can do to keep everybody focused on what I would say what matters most, the things that they're most interested in and responsible for. So this next thing, while I can't do this live, my wife is a college professor. She teaches in philosophy. So I usually do this little test for folks to see how well they are up to speed on their great philosophers. So the first quote I would ask is, who said to be is to do? Somebody may be wondering who it is. And of course, many of you, I'm sure if we did a polling question, John would say, we'd see 100% would say, to be is to do. Ah, of course, that was Plato. But what about another great philosopher who indicated to do is to be? And again, I'm sure if John did the polling question, all of you would effectively answer 100%, it was Socrates. But I'm sure many of you may not know the great philosopher who said, doobie doobie do. And for those of you who don't know, of course, Frank Sinatra, right? So a little bit of fun there about philosophy, and I hope my wife's not listening because she will not like the fact that I'm making fun of her discipline, but nonetheless. I bring this up in light of this next slide. And for those of you who don't know, this is a wonderful velociraptor, very intelligent prehistoric creature. And this is interesting because what I talked about earlier is complexity and data and everything is, there seems to be so much focus on the trees, right? People are so focused on the trees that you miss kind of the nuances of what you should be doing as a business. And Velociraptor says, what happens if you cut down all the trees and you still can't see the for us. So little humor there, but there's some reality to this in a sense that people just for some reason are so enamored with the detail and so much detail, not leveraging certain applications that can help them make some sense of it, but even more importantly to ask the question, do we really need to be worrying about all this detail all the time? And so what I'd like to talk about now is, as I mentioned before, I'm going to give you some real world examples. And these are just some. So when we do get to the question and answer period, if you don't see one, perhaps that's your pain point or you're wondering about, feel free to ask, because I will guarantee you I have probably seen the majority of these things. And there's I don't want to say there's a solution for everything, but there's a lot of applications out there that can do quite a bit for your organization in terms of improving things. So travel and expense management, T&E for short, leveraging in the cloud, and this is a company, this is a healthcare company. It was very interesting as they had these partnerships. They had over 27 locations. And because it was a partnership, they had to be so painstaking with their travel and expense management, which was done via Excel. They would literally, if a technician went to one location, and usually that technician was tied to a specific location, but let's say for some reason they needed his or her help at another location, they would drive there, track their mileage, come back. They would have to actually split it for when they got out of the territory. I mean, you're talking about an expense report and journal entry that would go down to the penny. Not value added in the least. And they had two separate Excel sheets that they used, and they submitted one every week. So 27 technicians plus another 8 that they called floaters are submitting expense reports twice a week, 4 to 5 weeks a month. A holistically slow process. Technicians not getting reimbursed on a timely basis. Hence, there are plenty of applications out there that you can leverage to do travel and expense management. And even to the extent that you can make it completely paperless. And oh, by the way, for, as I mentioned before, reducing enterprise risk, it is 100% compliant with IRS regulations. And I don't want to get into some of the details, but suffice to say, in many cases, if you have a expense and you use a credit card and it's attached to the application and it's $75 or less and it's not lodging, you don't even need to save the receipt. There's a thing called an e-receipt that the IRS will recognize as being compliant. So the point I want to make with this is it was integrated to the ERP system. It was mobile, whatever device you had, iPhone, Android phone, Windows phone, BlackBerry, and you could use this to effectively do your expense report every day, every minute. And take it a step further, there's an automated component to this now. So anything that is $75 or less, you use your credit card, it automatically sends the expense report on. So to talk about how you minimize, we used to be 5 people dealing with this, and now it's 1. And the other 4 people have been reassigned to add value in terms of improving the business operations moving forward. So that's and this is just one example. There's been many examples of this in my experience with clients I've dealt with. So John, let's go to polling question 2.
Let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and launch the second polling question right now. Coming to your screen, and that question is, does your business get caught in non-value-added activity like T&E process driven by Excel spreadsheets, which Tom just discussed, and boy, have I seen that in a lot of operations where I was in finance as well. Drives you crazy. And we'll leave this out for 30 seconds as we did last time. I'm also going to remind folks you can ask questions at any time here for us to work on when we get to the Q&A portion of today's event. Which will be coming up in a little bit here. So I've left this open for about 30 seconds. I'll leave it open for another couple moments, and then let's go ahead and close it down, share out the results. And the question is, does your business get caught in a lot of non-value-add activity? Tom, what do you think about this?
Wow, that's a lot, 60%. That's interesting. So here what I tell you, folks. I'm not going to tell you which one to go get, but I'd really recommend that if you're the ones doing it, you might want to look at some of the offerings out there in the cloud. It will make your life easier. You'd be a hero to the organization.
Yeah, and I think the point that you touched on earlier, is it critical to your operations? Is it something your company has to, recreate the wheel on and create your own process when, literally hundreds of thousands of other companies have done that? If the answer to that is no, then clearly going out and finding something that's genuinely inexpensive, off the shelf, integrates nicely with your core accounting platform, that just makes all the sense in the world. So Tom, back to your slides here, sir.
Great, thank you. So this is from one of my kids' math exams in high school. I was very proud of them, and the teacher on the quiz had, question number 1, find X, and of course my kid, being the wondrous individual that he is, answers, here it is, there's X, right? Kind of funny, but when you think about sometimes the simplest solutions are often the cleverest. Well, hence the travel and expense management example I gave you, and 60% of you saying, I think you still use Excel spreadsheets. There's something to be said. You don't have to get it to even match with the ERP system. It might just be better for you to adopt something that will expedite the process in terms of everything from approval to reimbursement. So, again, I use some tongue-in-cheek stuff through here, but I really want to drive home the fact that I would really encourage you to take a step back and look at your business and really question unnecessary complexity and address it and figure out if there's things out there that can help you alleviate that. And like I said, the cloud has plenty of offerings out there that can help you. So here's something that has always been near and dear to my heart for all of you out there who are accountants. Closing the books. It's almost a fear when you see those words, but it's also everything after. And I want to talk a little bit about the nonstop close, but if you think about taking a mindset of a 24/7, 365 close, you'd be like, well, you're crazy. We can't do that. And I think many years ago, I think some of you may have heard, Cisco closed the books in one day, and there were a lot of assumptions and estimates, if you will. But what you start to find with a lot of these cloud applications is they are real time. So not that I would say you want to do a bank rec every day, but when a system can automate it for you, the majority of it, where it's only going to basically kick out what are the things that are not matched, you maybe have to search down 2 or 3 items a day versus waiting to the end of the month and you're going to search down 300 items, if you will. Again, depending upon number of bank accounts and interactions and transactions you have, you'd be surprised about doing a daily bank rec, what you can get from that, almost having a real-time cash position. Many big companies and treasury departments have what's called a cash desk. Essentially, that's what this can do for you. That, and even in line of what we're going to do with payroll. Many systems today, you can get information out of the payroll system. You can book a journal entry if you want. You can have separate things when you have employees that are salaried. So there's a lot of things that you can do. I don't want to get into too much of the detail, but there are a lot of things that you're able to do on a real-time basis that can almost make your information in your system real-time. So knowing how many items you sold at the end of any given day, knowing how many items are in transit, knowing how many customers are in credit hold, knowing how much you collected in a certain day. I mean, these are things that 15, 20 years ago, you'd have to have, a whole, shared services center, if you will, with people moving paper around and all. You'd be amazed at what you can do with some of these cloud applications. You can have 3 people, and you could be acting like a 100-person shared service center. So what it does for you, I think, in many cases, is you can be a CFO that, somebody who's been providing historical backward-looking information, hence the accounting analogy I made, to almost, if you think about Apollo 13, I love that movie, and you look at NASA's mission control, and they just kind of knew everything about everything that was going on with those astronauts. In essence, that's what these cloud applications can provide for you. It can almost allow you to be almost like the mission control for your organization. Some of the other things I've done is you can build a board of directors dashboard. And what I mean by that is, for those of you who are CFOs, God knows how much time we spend putting together the board deck or the board book, and then we get to the meeting, and we probably spend 80% of the meeting talking about the numbers and what's right or wrong. When you put a dashboard together, and some board members are better than others, they may go out there and look at it, send questions even before the meeting. So when you get to the meeting, you're actually focusing on the things you should be focusing on to drive that business forward, not whether we've accrued for other accrued liabilities appropriately. The other thing, too, is it gives tremendous audit trails. And I've had some success in reducing audit fees with some of the larger audit firms. We're giving them access to the system off-cycle, and they can do off-cycle testing. And access meaning they don't have any ability to edit or anything. They can just view and write reports. And effective measurement, as I said before, whether you're the czar of March Madness, CEO of Accounts Payable, having those type of measurements on there is really important. And then the last thing I want to end with, on this particular topic, if you look at that photo where beautiful, we've got the clouds, we've got the balloon, and some of you may have heard this, but a man takes this balloon ride at a country fair, and winds come up and suddenly blow the balloon, violently away from the fair and into the countryside, and the balloon lands in a farmer's field, and the man has no idea where he's flown or to where. And he sees this person walking down the street, and he cries out, "Hey, excuse me, sir, can you tell me where I am?" And eyeing the man in the balloon, the passerby says to him, "You're in a down balloon in a farmer's field." And the balloonist says, "You must be an accountant, sir." To which the man says, "How could you possibly know that?" To which the balloonist responds, "Well, because you've told me something is absolutely correct, but of absolutely to no use to me now." So, okay, I got to not quit my day job, as John frequently tells me. So here's another interesting thing, and some of you may have heard of Dennis Miller, and he would do these rants. But this is something that it's kind of interesting, regardless of organizations that I go to, regardless of size. And this maybe also goes to the travel and expense management piece. It's kind of interesting about what people do to just cut a check. And so let me just, if you will, embellish me here. So let's think about this, right? So the invoice comes in. You hopefully have a matching thing. So somebody matches it, and they send it on to whoever has to approve it. And this is all paper-based. So somebody signs, yep, pay this thing, goes back into this thing. It's batched together. It's sent to the CFO or controller. He or she looks at it and says, okay, yep, it's okay to pay. They send it back to the person who batched everything together. That person batches everything else, takes the other person, and then is going to write the report that's going to put all the checks into for a batch. And then we do that, and we print the checks out, and we staple the checks with the stubs and everything back to the whole stack of paper, which has now gone from 1 inch to half a foot, goes back to the office of the CFO. The CFO is looking at stuff and like, what is this one for? I'm not quite sure. Oh, well, I've got to go back to the filing cabinet because there's more detail. I get the stuff out of the filing cabinet, I bring it back, I give it to the CFO. Say, oh, yeah, I get that. Yep, oh, yeah, we should approve that one. So then the CFO gets done signing everything else, sends a whole bunch of stuff back to the person who initially put all the stuff together. That person then takes everything and batches it, and the checks get printed. Hopefully there's an electronic signing machine. If not, it goes back to the CFO. He or she signs off the checks come back. The person then rips off each check and then takes the check, hits the envelope, stiffs it in the envelope, takes the other the voucher, puts it back in the filing cabinet, and hopefully mails everything. That's a wonderful process, and I'm sure many of you go through that. But what if I told you could automate that entire process? What the cloud can help you do, whether you use specific applications for that or many ERP offerings do this, you can digitize everything, you can attach the receipts, you can attach the invoices, put as much detail as you want. The person approving it can look at it anytime they want, right? So we're all busy people. Maybe they want to approve checks 2 a.m. in the morning. That's up to them. Once it's done, they can click on it, and you have services that then take it, print it, mail it, send it, and that's it. And it's not even paper anymore. So the point I want to make about cutting a check, almost like the travel and expense management process, it is amazing to me how much interaction has to go on between several people across the organization, not just in the finance and accounting groups, just to get a check printed and sent. Amazing. So one other quick example, mobile workforce management. And I want to bring this up for a reason. This was done with out-of-the-box technology and hardware, if you will. So you have a situation where this was an exercise equipment company, and they wanted customers to receive, services and repair and be on time and on budget. There were over 25 service techs across the country, and frequent communication was important, and there's a steady flow of requests of what's going on. So you can imagine it was kind of done by cell phone. Hey, where are you right now? Well, I'm on this road. Oh, well, somebody just called us on this street. Can you drive over there? And it's, not knowing that there was a person literally, maybe, 2 blocks from that location. But it was all done on paper, and it was all done manually. They actually ended up migrating, leveraging an ERP solution and simple smartphones where they could get electronic data signature. They could get real-time capabilities on when the customers were being serviced, the notes, everything went great, customers still not happy. What also came out of this, surprisingly, is not only could they tell them, hey, you're going to have a service tech come to your house, and sometime between 8 a.m. and midnight, they're going to show up. So that's always great. Well, they could tell them within a certain window of time when that service tech would be there. But what's also interesting about this is it started to happen where their service plans, 1, 2, or 3 year offerings, they started to see a jump in the ability to sell these things. Because the service techs could say, hey, you know what, we have the service plan, 1, 2, or 3, they could do it all electronically. The customer could sign on the dotted line right then and there. They had a credit card swipe, boom, done. Amazing what was able to be accomplished with this. And they even were able to reduce the service tech force. So it, in some regard, got the best of the best, and they became more efficient and more effective. So, some advice about perfecting key business processes. A little tongue-in-cheek. The doctor is in. Sometimes, you may feel like there's so much opportunity. Where do I start? What I would argue, it depends on you. It depends on your company. I've seen it in both extremes. Big bang, we're going to do everything. To we just want to take a little piece of the pie, and we're going to cut off, and we're going to fix this one process. I've seen it work both ways. So the advice I want to give you here is, if you think there's a lot of value added to basically gutting everything and putting in a new system and all, it can be done. You don't need to be scared of it or whatever. If your company is not in the mindset of being able to take those big chunks, there's plenty of things you can bite off and chew, hence the travel and expense management example that we've talked about here, and 60% of you are still using a Excel file. Based travel and expense management. So I want to say thank you and turn it back to John.
Great, thanks very much, Tom. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and hop into the Q&A. So we encourage questions, and thanks. We've got a couple questions to get started with, but feel free to add your questions as we go here, as we've got a few minutes to chat. And Tom, the first question you were kind of just getting at there, as you wound things up, was how does one begin when looking for whether there might be an application that fits a particular issue? And actually, that's the question I'd like to move upstream one more, which is, how do you determine where to look first? How do you figure out what your, do you want to take an easy process and move that into the cloud, or do you want to look for your biggest issue, which might, be a much broader, tougher challenge? Where do you look to even figure out where you're going to start?
Well, I think a couple of things go into that. As I was mentioning, it depends upon the company, the culture, appetite. It also can depend on the type of business you have. It could be a seasonal business in nature, such that maybe you're really focused around the holidays. So September to January, it's just lights out, and you are head to the delivery things and whatever it might be. But then in the other months, it may be kind of light. So what I've found with some companies is they have the appetite, they have the time, they have the resources to embrace a big bang approach, if you will, to put in an ERP system. In other cases, there may be something, I just, obviously we're beating this horse to death here, but if you have 60% of the people responding that you're using Excel-based travel and expense management, just think about that for a second. The people that are involved to make sure that that's compliant, that requires a lot of time and effort. So I think you're almost exposed there. Number two, the amount of time, effort, and resource that goes into maintaining that type of a process, again, I would argue is not really value added. I mean, you want to be driving your business, not having the best, manual travel and expense management process. So sometimes you may want to, again, there's not one size that fits all, but there's a couple factors I think you need to take into consideration: culture, timing, resource availability. Because the one thing, and we all know this, I don't care what you're doing, big bang or a simple implementation of a particular application, you have got to be involved in it. You have got to own it. So don't think for a minute that the consulting firms are going to come in and they're going to get it done for you. When they go, you own it. You need to invest yourself in that process from start to finish.
And you just mentioned something that's part of another question. You mentioned consulting firms. The question is about, how useful is it to have third parties come in and help you figure all of this out? Is that where you see most folks going because they don't have the expertise in-house, or do they give it a whirl themselves and just kind of figure it out as they go?
It's a couple things. I mean, it depends upon your enthusiasm relative to this type of stuff. So if you're the type of person that you want things to be better, but you're not necessarily somebody who wants to really get into the whole technical aspects of stuff, yeah, you're probably going to want to reach out to an organization or a person that's going to be able to help you navigate what's available to you, what would they recommend. Because the one piece I would probably put forth is why I do what I do now is I don't approach this from a technology standpoint. If I was a CFO, I guess I still am, and CIO, but not a CTO, right? So meaning there's plenty of opportunity out there to choose something that's going to work for you. And just like you're going to pick a vendor if you're adding on to your office building, you're going to put them through certain levels of review. How stable are they? What are the references that they have? What is their customer base? These are things that you can do and you can look at. But in a nutshell, I think what you have to do is, if you have no knowledge of this stuff, if you really want to get some insight, you might be able to reach out to somebody just to get you going, and you could take it from there. Or you may feel more comfortable. I've done it many different ways, where you go and give them a high level. Here's what's going on. Here's what the do's and don'ts. They take it and run with it. To we need you here from day one to day go live, and that's how we want to do it. So again, I probably should go into politics because I'm not giving a yes or no answer.
Well, thanks. With some perspective at least. Now, our next question, and interestingly, this one actually asked me, do I have an example of use of an application, I suppose, the cloud application in FP&A? So I'll go ahead and take a swing at this, and then Tom, I'll ask you for your follow-up. So in multiple instances, I've used third-party budgeting and forecasting platforms in the cloud that were integrated with cloud-based ERP. And I just can't tell you what a revelation it is to use something like that, especially when there's the integration. So you can go straight from actuals to forecast and have all of your versions of every permutation, whether it's the budget that got locked in or whether it's Q1 forecast version 6. You can just very quickly and easily go from permutation to permutation. And one of the beautiful things about this, and Tom hit on this a little bit, but I want to really emphasize it here, is the cloud makes collaboration so much easier. So you give the appropriate access to your business partners who are the ones forecasting and shipping products, and they can enter the data on their end, and you give the appropriate access to folks in the treasury organization where they can enter their assumptions, and it all comes together without having to shuffle all of these spreadsheets around. And even if it's only 2 or 3 folks, or if it's hundreds of people, literally, depending on the size, these things scale really nicely. Having the ability to control at a very granular level who gets access to what, having it all come together, and then having it all be captured, versionable, but without having to fire up Excel. Which is to say, it's just seamless, and that whole actual to forecast thing and the ability to drill down, which Tom mentioned earlier, that's really valuable. But I'd say that's right in the heart of FP&A, which is about budgeting and forecasting. There are also a lot of great analytics and data visualization and reporting platforms out there which help with other sort of the analysis part of FP&A. It's just a revelation, and the fact is, you're saving so much time and you're becoming so much more effective and impactful that sure, you're replacing something that's virtually free because everyone already has Excel with something that's paid, but the ROI is tremendous. You have to look beyond the traditional sort of capital cost of software and to the P&L impacts of am I able to do more with the same amount of people? Or am I able to impact the profitability of the business more directly with greater impact? that's your ROI, and I find that's usually a no-brainer. But yeah, the cloud is all over FP&A, and it's just so much easier. Tom, what do you say about FP&A in the cloud?
Yeah, I agree with that. Earlier in my career, I worked at Pepsi or PepsiCo, and we loved to forecast. Boy, we did weekly forecasts, and what I used to really love is when the marketing manager for Diet Orange Slice wanted to change her volume plan for a certain month. As much as I'd like to think my Excel model was just perfect and flawless, then my weekend was pretty much blown at that point because there was a lot of effort that had to go into that. So having some of these tools in the cloud that are integrated, collaborative, or it's incredible. But the other thing I'll tell you is kind of the message I'm saying, when you're going to do this stuff and you do your what-if analysis, or you set your plan and you're going to send it out to folks, if you have an ERP solution and it's integrated, everybody's getting the same type of reporting. So you don't have to have like here's my daily reporting and it's coming out of this system, but here's our budget and it's coming out of that system. The proverbial everybody can work off of one sheet of paper is very impactful for an organization to take what John was saying, all those what ifs and changes and revisions and uploading them into a system that's easily reported on is very important.
Right. Actually, thanks for bringing that up. I didn't even touch on the reporting aspect. Once you simply set up a report once and then expose, senior staff, for instance, of the senior staff kind of informational report, you never have to set that thing up again. You never have to touch it again unless you have requests or you think, hey, I should be adding, subtracting, certain types of data. But once that's automated, people can come, they can self-serve. You can self-serve anytime you want to run it. You can run it, immediately populate with your apps and the rest of your forecast, whatever you're doing. It's just incredible how much effort that saves. Hey, Tom, one other really quick question. We're running short on time here. When you are looking at applications for, let's say, mid-sized and large companies where you might have hundreds, even thousands of folks on the platform, what do you say to the question of, well, doesn't that get expensive?
Yes and no. It depends on, the type of licenses you're going to need. So on the budgeting and planning side of things, you probably don't need full users for everybody. You may just need, as John said, collaborators, and you can send out a simple sheet, and you can literally tell them, fill in the blanks, and those licenses are a lot less expensive than the admin user, if you will. As far as the ERP solutions are concerned, what I would tell you is the bigger companies and the more users, every organization has its list price. But if I were you, wait to the end of the month or the end of the quarter, and it's amazing the type of discounts you will get on what the license cost is.
Yeah. End of Q3 coming up. Use that to your advantage. But also, truly, there's volume-based pricing. So, the pricing for users 1 through 5 is nothing like the pricing for users 100 to, 249. So, you'll definitely want to probe on that. And yes, the type of users that you get is critical. And remember, you've got to do a full ROI analysis. How much are you spending right now on the human beings running the process today, and is that process truly effective or not, versus being able to take out hard costs and hard and soft benefits in terms of better reporting becomes better results, becomes greater profitability, et cetera. So we'll leave on that note. Tom, we did have a couple questions we didn't get to. Do you mind if we work with you to get those answered perhaps in the Performative community?
Certainly.
Excellent. Then everyone will be able to see. Please do join us at Performative.com. Speaking of which, to continue the conversation with your peers and with SMEs like Tom. Tom is both a peer and an SME in this case. If you want an introduction to today's speaker, that's Tom Kelly at Cumula 3 Group, or today's sponsor, NetSuite, please let us know in the post-event survey. Also, if you'd like to know more about sort of the real-time learning at Performative Academy or our upcoming CFO Dimensions conference, let us know on that post-event survey. Tom, excellent job today. Thanks so much for your insight.
Thank you.
You bet. Also, final thanks to our sponsor, NetSuite, whose commitment to leadership in this realm and really in the cloud helps us make this educational webinar possible and available at no cost to our attendees. I've just launched third polling question. We're right at the end of our hour here. We'll open 30 seconds as we do all the others. We're not going to have time to go through this because we're right at the end of it here. But I do want to thank everyone for joining today. Great information, great learning from Tom, greatly appreciated, and thanks everyone for giving us this hour. We recognize how busy everyone is, so that's not an easy thing to do. We certainly hope to see you at another Performative event or online at performative.com. So I'm going to go ahead and close out this third and final poll. I'm going to shut down the webinar, and reminder, everyone will be sent right now to the post-event survey where you can ask questions, ask for connections, etc. Thanks so much in advance for this extra little bit of time. Take care, folks. See you soon.